Hey, hello everyone. Cheers. Hello, Kay. You win the race this afternoon. Cotty and John. Hello, Sarah and all the tricks. Great to see you. I'm torturing myself at the moment because I after making my suggestions for food and wine matches yesterday. I'm so sorry about the lateness of the email yesterday. I thought because Jill and Richard are away, and I'm here by myself with the two poodles, three cats, one peacock, many chooks, and a whole gang of cockatoos that arrive at 6 o'clock in the morning for breakfast. I thought, I don't really feel like cooking for myself tonight. Hello, Peter and Karen. Lovely to see you. It's been a tough week here too. Good, but tough. So I got myself an order from Providor, and I've got a New England lobster roll. So I'm very excited, and I can just smell the butter and the lobster just kind of wafting up at me. So quite excited about that. I'll try not to shove it all in my mouth in one go and not be able to talk to you. All right, here we go. Hello, Nigel. So it's our penultimate tasting before we break for summer and for Christmas. How did that happen so quickly? It's ridiculous. We are tasting tonight the Moorooduc McIntyre Chardonnay 2020. I think this is a really special treat. We only released this a few weeks ago at Cellar Door, and I think it's young, but it's looking pretty sexy. Because I'm here on my own, I'm not going to use the decanter because I don't want to aerate the whole bottle. I'm going to put half of it into a half bottle and just drink half because I'm a good girl, and I also have work to do tomorrow. But you might want to just pop yours into a decanter quickly before you put it in the glass. So remembering when we're doing a decant, big kind of with a young wine, you don't want to spill it everywhere, but it doesn't matter if it's a bit splashy into the decanter and then straight into your glass and straight into your mouth. Hello, Karen and Joan. I know Craig's had to go to another party. What a busy man he is. I hope. Well, maybe you'll save him some wine if he's very good. Who else is there? Yes, yay for Providor, absolutely. Hello, Shell. Home with the cats and Andrew's in Canberra. Oh, hi, Andrew and John. Lovely to see you. I hope everyone's got wine. Okay, let's get this wine open and in the glass. So as I say, if you want to decant it, what I might do is just decant a little bit of it, just to kind of, remind you how to do it. Not that you need any reminders these days, but just to remind you how to do it, and also just to get a bit of air into it before I get into the glass. So you can decant a part of a bottle. So I've made sure I've got plenty left in the bottle there because, g'day, Nareem. Keely's in Brisbane, Vegas. Jill and Richard are in Sydney, Manly. So I'll come back to that. But now I've got a nice little bit of Chardonnay in my decanter. You can see I've put it in quite roughly because you've got bubbles in there. Give it a little swirl. And Shell, you didn't want to, aren't you good? Port Phillip Estate 2020 Shardy. That's not a bad thing to be drinking tonight either. How are you feeling, Shell? How's your COVID taste buds? Are they still struggling a little bit? All right, let's get this in the glass. There you go. Look at me, a perfect glass of wine. I've obviously done this far too many times before. Right, decanter can go over there. Give that a little swirl. Nice generous pour for Kate on this Thursday, 2.5 weeks before Christmas. I'm glad. Garlic on everything. Good, Shell. That's awesome. So you can see already that this has got a beautiful colour to it. It's sort of pale golden in colour. It's got that sort of gold hue to it rather than being lemony yellow, but it's quite pale, but it's got a kind of nice sheen to it. It is going to take a little while to open up, and I'm a little hay fevery again today. Apologies. I have taken my meds, but they seem to be wearing off before the end of the day at the moment. Craig's out partying. Well, Karen, if he will go to other parties, you can't be responsible for making sure there's wine for him when he comes home, can you? So On the nose, I'm getting really lovely white nectarine perfumes here. There's also a beautiful kind of intense lemoniness. I think with both of the 2020 single vineyard Chardonnays, they've got a lot of intensity and a lot of complexity. The difference between the Robinson that we had 2 weeks ago and this wine is that the Robinson's really in your face and really kind of ready to party straight away, whereas this one just takes a little bit longer to open up. So if you haven't decanted it and you're not smelling a lot, keep swirling it, keep getting the air into it, let it evolve. So I'm getting a little tickle in my throat. Haven't got rid of that yet. One day. I think the dogs think I'm barking when I cough, because whenever I cough, I get a bark from the dogs. That's all right, Frody. It's just me. Shh, Frode, go back to sleep. It's okay. Deaf old dog. So lots of lemon rind, like when you zest a lemon. I did it just at lunchtime today, so I've got that smell very freshly in my mind. A little bit almost of mandarin I get as well. Hello, Robin Deb. How you going? Good to see you. We haven't got too far yet. I'm getting, I was saying lemon rind, lemon oil, a little bit of mandarin oil in there. Almost a kumquat kind of a perfume there. For those of you who have kumquat trees, you'll know exactly what I mean. Not kumquat marmalade. It has to be fresh kumquats. And if you haven't had a fresh kumquat, come on down to Moorooduc this summer. I think we've got quite a lot on the tree still. So all those lovely citrus fruit characters, some white nectarine. There's a little tiny bit of caramelized sort of buttered toast, and I don't think that's my lobster roll. Oh, for those of you who came in late, Kate's got a lobster roll today. Okay, lobster tail singers, fantastic. How beautiful. Hello, Sonia, how are you going? It will be beautiful with your oysters, absolutely. All right, I'm going to pop some in my mouth. So the reason it's going to work with oysters is because it's got beautiful natural acidity. It's really going to make your mouth water. And it's going to do exactly what, if you've got oysters and you usually squeeze some lemon on it or put some raspberry vinegar or something like that on there, don't put anything acid on the oysters. Just have the oysters as they are and have a mouthful, or even pour a little bit of the wine into the oyster before you eat the oyster. It will be magnificent. I do that with champagne all the time, and this wine's got plenty of acid to make that work really well. So you get that really tangy citrus acid character all around the front of the mouth and down the sides of your tongue. And it's really concentrated fruit, really concentrated citrus fruit, again with the lemon, but it's lemon juice on the palate rather than lemon oil and lemon rind on the nose. It's like biting into a juicy kumquat. It's like it's still got that lovely white nectarine flavor coming through on the tongue, but yeah, it tingles the tongue. Absolutely, Cotty. It's really delicious. And so the acid, that high acid makes it work, and that citrus kind of flavor makes it work with oysters. But it's got a richness and a slightly more textural quality to it than the Robinson Chardonnay, which is what makes it go really well with your lobster sandwich, particularly if you've got a little bit of mayonnaise and things in with the lobster. The wine can really cope with that creaminess, and the sweetness of the lobster meat works really, really well. Also works well with prawns for the same reason. Prawns have really sweet meat. You don't need to smother them with anything acidic, but you could have some rosemary sauce or some nice mayonnaise with your prawns, and that would work really well. The thing about a Chardonnay like this, it's got the acid, but it's got the French call it matière grasse, which means fatty matter, and that sounds a bit gross, but it's that kind of weightiness that you get in the mid palate. It almost is like it's like the butter on your toast. It's like the lamb fat on your chops. It's like olive oil on your pasta. It makes it slippery and it makes it tasty at the same time. And it's got this real kind of savory note to it, and then you get that lovely Moorooduc McIntyre Vineyard saltiness right on the finish. So it's a really complicated and complex amalgam of flavors. The wine's really young compared to the previous McIntyre Chardonnays that we've looked at, and it usually looks really tight. I'm really impressed at how it's opening up quite quickly for me, and I think doing that little decant, getting it into a big glass has really helped. I also, true to my word, it is cold down here. I've got my merino jumper on. I wasn't planning to wear this today, but it's 14 degrees out there and it feels colder because the air's really cold. So I just kept the wine in a cool place rather than in the fridge. So it's at room temperature for me, which is a really nice temperature to drink medium to full-bodied white wine like this. I think it works really, really well. I was talking to a friend the other day about tasting notes, and he was saying sort of how do you come up with tasting notes, and sometimes they're very evocative. Moreton Bay bugs would be awesome, absolutely. Did you know that in Brisbane, a lot of chefs are starting to call them river lobsters because they think and in Sydney as well, they're calling them river lobsters or river lobsters. Because they think that sounds a little bit sexier than Moreton Bay bugs. But I love Moreton Bay bugs, and I love the fact that they're called bugs and that they're so ugly but so delicious. They're amazing. They're amazing little sea creatures, and they've got even sweeter meat to them than a lobster often. What was I talking about before? Oh, yes. So evocative tasting notes. I think often people think that it's either a magic skill to be able to taste wine and turn it into words, or that we're just kind of making stuff up. And I think that Andrew said they're drinking 2018 McIntyre Chardonnay. It didn't need a decant. No, it wouldn't have. The 18 is drinking really nicely right now. It's got a little bit of development to it, but it's still holding everything together really nicely. That wine's going to go for another 10 years, but it's in a really beautiful place right now too. So I think that's fantastic. When you're tasting and writing tasting notes, a lot of people say, how do you get the aromas and how do you get the flavors? And some people go so far as to say, do they put those things in with the wine? Does the wine smell like lemon because they put lemons in there? And we know that's not right, but it's not a ludicrous question to ask, because when we talk about wine tasting, we use lots of sort of coded language, and it can get quite confusing and intimidating for people, I think, a lot of the time. So in the way that, and I think I caught myself doing it in the early days of Drinks with Kate, and I don't even know if I do it still or whether I've fixed myself. But when we say, let's have a little look at this wine, and people go, oh, do we only get to look at it? Can't we smell it and taste it? And of course, what we mean in the wine industry when we say, let's have a look at the wine, we mean, let's taste the wine. Let's look at it, smell it, put it in our mouths, see what the flavors are. But we say look at it for whatever reason, I don't know. Equally, all of the aromas and flavors that I get from wine are things, I think the best way to sort of describe it is aroma and taste memories that you have. So you smell a wine and you go, oh, that reminds me of that time I had that beautiful white nectarine that was, still warm, picked off the tree, and it was all juicy and sweet, and the juices ran down my chin, and that smells like that. But it also smells like someone squeezed some lemon juice over it, and the oil from the lemon skin has got onto the nectarine, and then the juice has dribbled down over the nectarine, so it's tangier than a nectarine would be in that sort of lemony way. Kumquats, as I was talking about before, kumquats are such fun because they're funny little tiny orange citrus fruits, and all the sugar's in the skin, so people don't know how to eat them as fruit. They make fantastic marmalade because all the sugar's in the skin, and when you're making marmalade, you use the skin. But people kind of peel them and then try and eat the fruit, and they're really sour and they're really tart. But if you take the whole kumquat, skin and all, and bite into it and chew it up, as I say, the skin and the sugar and most of the flavor is in the skin, and you get this wonderful burst of fresh, tangy, orangey, lemony kind of flavor. It's really cool. And I think that one of the reasons that I love talking about and tasting wine is because I'm just obsessed with flavors and smells with everything. And wine's one of those funny things that nobody told me when I was a kid that wine could be a career and that it could combine my love of talking to people and my love of traveling and my love of trying to express complicated concepts through putting the right words together. Nobody said that wine could be, something creative and businesslike and fun. It's, everyone fixates on the alcohol, which is fine. Alcohol's great, it makes you relaxed at the end of the day. We've all had a crappy day. We all feel like a glass of wine, and the alcohol just makes us go, oh, that's better. But for me, the things that are more exciting about tasting wine is everything else besides the alcohol. It's the aromas and the flavors and how they make me reminisce and how they make me feel and what they remind me of. So I think when we try and do tasting notes for people um, who are doing their wine studies, WSET or their Master of Wine, then you have to pare it all down. And the Wine and Spirit Education Trust and the Institute of Master of Wine are not interested in your feelings and how you're reacting to the wine. They just want you to be really analytical. So you sort of smell it and you kind of go, well, the things that I can smell, the lemon and the white nectarine and a little bit of spice from the oak and a little bit of cedar from the oak and a little bit of butteriness, which indicates the wine's been through a malolactic fermentation. Those fruit aromas are consistent with Chardonnay. The acid level backs that up. The amount of alcohol in the wine that's not too high and not too low is also consistent with a cool climate Chardonnay. You're making, you're noticing things in the glass and then you're linking them to conclusions. So again, people say to me, "Oh, it's amazing that you're a master of wine." And in a lot of ways it is, because it took me a really long time to do it and it took a lot of work to get there. But it's not magic. It's not something that some people can do and some people can't do. I think if anyone puts the right amount of a lot of work into trying to learn how to do this, and you learn some systems for kind of filing that information in your brain in a meaningful way and then being able to regurgitate that in written form onto a paper, anyone with the right practice and the right amount of humbleness, I think, could become a master of wine. But when we're here just tasting, we're more about thinking about how does this wine make me feel, and how delicious is it. Rob has this is a wine marketing question. Why are tasting notes on most bottles either absent or lame? Okay. And Kate, I'll get to your question in just a moment. So I would assume, Rob, that most bottles have labels on them that were printed well before the wine was in any shape to be tasted. And by the time the wine is in bottle with the label on it, it's going to taste quite different from how it tasted when the producer was printing those labels. So it's easier. And one of the reasons we don't put tasting notes on our bottles is for exactly that reason. When we print the back label, the wine is not tasting or smelling anything like it's going to smell and taste when the wine's ready to go. And I think that's one of the cool things about QR codes. We don't really use them a lot because they haven't quite been picked up. But I think that having a QR code on the back label that then links you to a current tasting note is much more useful than someone trying to write a tasting note 6 or 12 or 18 months before the wine's finished and out on the shelves. Jeremy, are you seconding my answer? Are you? Thank you. Websites should have tasting notes. Don't look on the Moorooduc Estate website for all of our tasting notes because it's a bit of a mess at the moment, but we're planning to, we promise to get it under control early in the first half of next year. See how I kind of corrected myself? Not very early in the new year, but sometime in the first half of next year, hopefully the website will be up to date and have all the tasting notes on it and be perfect. Oh gosh, lots of questions coming through. Kay has said, talking WSET, watch the 3 docos called Somme. Yes, that is an intense qualification. And to be a master sommelier is very similar to the master of wine, but the master sommelier exam is mostly verbal, oral examination, whereas the master of wine examination is equally intense, but the exam actually written. So you have to write essays and write tasting notes rather than present them to a board of examiners verbally. So both pretty equally intense, but just different ways of delivering the information. And it's much more exciting seeing sommeliers standing up going blah, 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 about wine da, 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 than watching a whole lot of MWs sitting in the exam room writing essays, scratch, 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 scratch. But if you had some MWs reading their essays out, I think that would be an amazing documentary, having them kind of, after the exam reading the essays out and sort of, this is a good essay, this is not a great essay, this is a good taste note, because essays were originally written to be the presentation of an oral exam. Some of you probably know this, but back in like a long time ago, the Oxbridge essay was written to then be read out to a court of examiners in an examination hall. You get to read it out once and then they mark you. So I always tell my students that, because I think people think essays have to be really convoluted and difficult to follow, and that's the opposite of what an essay should be. An essay should be very clear, very concise, very good language, short sentences, not rambling, making sure that you're linking a comment to some evidence in the wine world to back up your assertion about whatever it is that you're asserting. So yeah, I think So I think the sommeliers have done an amazing job of promoting themselves through those docos, and I think the Masters of Wine. I'm not sure whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we're not so good at self-promotion. We kind of just get on with it. So, yeah. Deb, focusing our attention on our senses brings us into the present moment. Mindfulness, ease in the body when focusing on something so pleasurable. Body and mind. Absolutely, Deb. And I was talking just yesterday to a friend as well about mindful wine tasting and being in the moment and really concentrating on what you're tasting, and how it's affecting all of your senses. So I think that's absolutely right. Nigel will take you through the wine at Cellar Door, absolutely, and he'll do his little sommelier impression, which is always fun. Thank you, Nigel. Sonia, are all our bottles created on the same day? So yes, all of these bottles of wine that you guys are tasting from the 2020 Moorooduc McIntyre Chardonnay, that is not very many barrels. Jeremy might be able to chime in with a little message to, if you can remember how we didn't make very much of this wine at all. So all of that wine was amalgamated and taken to the bottling line and put in bottle on the same day. So picked on the same day. So the fruit picked on the same day, because it's all the same. It's all from the same vineyard, and that vineyard we do one pass through and pick it in one go. The wine is made the same way, but there's maybe 2, 3, 4 barrels of the wine, so there'll be little different, slight differences in the batches. 4 to 5 barriques, Jeremy is saying, so 228 litres in total. So when we're getting the wine ready for bottling, we'll blend all those barriques together in a tank. We'll check all the levels of gas and all of that kind of thing, and get it ready to go to the bottling line. So yes, Cotty, we do blend the barrels. We pump all 4 or 5 barrels into a tank, so they're all mixed together. So you have a homogeneous wine across all of the bottles. In Burgundy, some older fashioned producers will bottle straight from the barrel. So if they've got 4 barrels, then you'll have 4 distinctively different wines. I think that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure that all of the wine that is called the Moorooduc McIntyre Chardonnay consistently tastes and smells the way that it does, but it's different again from all of our other Chardonnays that we make. I hope that all makes sense. Shell is saying roast lamb doesn't really go with the wine. No. Roast lamb, I think roast lamb is a Pinot Noir or a Shiraz food. Also works well with Chianti and even Nebbiolo. But air-fried cauliflower and broccoli, you can't tell if it goes with it, doesn't not go with it. Okay, sure. I think air-fried, certainly cauliflower would be good with this. I don't think broccoli would fight with it, but I don't think it'd be an amazing wine and food match. But that's okay. If you're not getting all the nuances, Shell, at the moment, then it doesn't matter. Cotty, do you occasionally have one barrel that tastes very different from the rest? We do, occasionally, and if it tastes less good than the rest, then it doesn't get included or it gets downgraded to the estate or the Devil Bean Creek wine. If it is sorry, Kay, I just saw your comment. That's hilarious and also absolutely correct, I think. This wine does go with things that are light in colour, similar to the amber going with pink food last week. Absolutely. But yeah, Cotty, sometimes one barrel tastes very different from the rest, but when we do a blending trial, so we'll always do a trial before we pump all the barrels together, we'll get the same amount of each wine out of the barrel and mix it together in a pipette and taste it and make sure that it tastes the way that we want it to taste. And the biggest thing that will make a barrel taste completely different from the rest is if it's a new barrel, and we'll often have maybe one new barrel in the mix. So if it's 4 barrels, then that'll mean maybe 25% new oak. If it's 5 barrels, it might mean 20% new oak if we put the whole of the new oak barrel in. But these days we're doing even more complicated fractional blending. If we want less new oak, then we'll take a portion of the wine from a new oak barrel and blend that with more of a percentage of second, third, fourth, fifth fill barrels. So it's quite complicated. Sometimes it's really obvious what's going to work and sometimes it's not. So depending on the year, we'll do lots of blending trials. Sometimes we'll just go, yep, we know exactly what's going to happen, and we just check it and we go, yep, good, excellent. So yeah, it's all part of the winemaking process. I think a lot of people think that a winemaker needs to add different ingredients to the grapes, but it's really about taking the different parcels of fruit and the different parcels of wine and working out how they come together to make the most harmonious version of the wine that we want to make. I think that's one of the great skills of the trained winemaker and remembering what wine tasted like last year, what the same wine from a previous vintage tastes like last year, the year before, 10 years prior, and sort of matching that up with the style of wine and how we're seeing the wine looking from the year that we're making. So it's quite cool. Comfy chair goes well, does it, Linda? Good. Linda's had a very busy couple of days. I should tell you, actually, if you haven't noticed on our website or on our social media, we're having a little bit of trouble with our phone lines at the moment. So Linda has had a horrendous couple of days, even though it was her birthday yesterday. So happy birthday for yesterday, Linda. Cheers. Everybody knows that you can't cheers and then not drink, don't you? Because it's terribly bad luck if you say cheers and then don't drink. Now I have to drink again. So Sonia, how do you develop the wine memory required? It's really about just keeping on tasting and doing some study on tasting and how you kind of think about how the acid and the flavors work together. But it's quite incredible. It's quite incredible. Yes, Kay says easy, drink lots. Thanks, Nareem. Cheers. You tricked me, Nareem. That could be heaps of fun, hey. But yes, it is about tasting a lot, and particularly if you're making a particular wine, we'll taste that wine. We'll taste it as fruit. We'll taste it as soon as it starts fermenting. We'll taste it as soon as finished. Yes, sometimes notes, but not always. I mean, we have a quite a quite detailed book of what we've done to the wine along the way, but we don't actually have tasting notes for each of the different bits of the wine because we taste them enough along throughout the year, and then we'll compare them to the next vintage of the same parcel of fruit that we start seeing similar characters popping up, and you do become quite focused on what's similar and what's different from year to year. And it's hard to believe if you haven't done it. It's a little bit like if you have a favorite cake recipe that you make, let's say once a month or even every week, and it always turns out a little bit different, even though you're using the same recipe, because every time you make it, there'll be slight variations. It might be a bit warmer, it might be a bit cooler. Your hand might jiggle a little bit when you're putting the cocoa powder in, whatever. But there'll be lots of things about that cake that is similar to every time you make that cake. But you'll also, the more often you make it and the more often you taste it, the more often you'll notice the subtle differences. And I think that we certainly find that with the wine. Connie's asking if we taste the wine at the same intervals each year. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes we'll taste things more often and sometimes less often, depending on what the year's like. But between Jeremy and Richard and I, we do probably Jeremy and Richard do a lot more tasting than I do. When Chardonnay is sort of doing its thing after fermentation, Jeremy or Richard will check each barrel every month to make sure that the level hasn't gone down too far. It might need to be topped up just to make sure, to see how it's smelling and tasting, to make sure nothing bad has happened. And so they're tasting each barrel every month for an 8, 9, 10-month period. And no, not necessarily taking notes, because they've got their brains and their palates trained to remember what they're looking for that's positive and what they're looking for to make sure isn't there that might be a negative problem with the wine. So it's not a sort of a complex reading of the final wine that we're getting, but we're saying, okay, well, that wine has got really lovely citrus fruit characters. That barrel over there is a little bit more peachy, nectarine. It feels a little bit richer. That one, because it's a second fill barrel, has got more cedar and vanilla and spice coming through. And yeah, they do. They change. John wants to know, what do you top the barrels up with? Wine, of course. We have. So it's sometimes about consolidating barrels. Sometimes we'll use a little bit of a wine from a previous year from bottle if there's only a little bit that needs to be topped up. Wine will be kept in different size containers for that reason, like demijohns, smaller barrels, small tanks. So yeah, we have topping wine that we sort of sacrifice every year, which means that along the way, there's less wine at the end of the winemaking process than there was at the beginning, if that makes sense. How is people's? I know that Kay's lobster sandwich is going well with the wine, and I know that the lamb is not working with it. Are other people having nice food and wine matches? Because I'm gonna have a little bit of my roll before it gets too cold. I'm just going to cut a little bit off so that I don't stuff it all in my mouth and I'm not able to talk for the next 5 minutes. But I'm a bit excited about this. Oh, that's awesome. I love restaurant food. It has lots of salt and it has lots of fat in it. It makes it taste delicious. And the lobster is really sweet. It's dressed to be quite salty. It's got a creaminess from I'm not sure if it's mayonnaise. If it's mayonnaise, it's very light. I think it's more like a sort of a creamy sort of dressing. There's a little bit of pepperiness from the watercress. And it just Makes the wine taste completely different. The lemoniness of the wine kind of wraps around the creaminess of the sandwich. The sweetness of the lobster brings out the more saline notes of the wine, which is really delish. I think super duper. Cotty worked well with the Spanish potato chips. Terrible with the truffle chips. Oh dear, truffle chips can be disappointing. They can be exciting, but most often they can be disappointing. But Spanish potato chips. When I wrote the thing about having some plain potato chips, I did mean fancy plain potato chips, and I didn't really know how to put it in simple, without going on and everyone going, "Oh God, Kate, stop writing a diatribe about jolly potato chips." But when I was traveling in the UK, and I've noticed as well here, that everyone's got the cool new chips. So if it's not the chippy chipsters that we had, do you remember those French chips that I had that were the porcini mushroom ones? And they don't seem to do a plain, or they don't bring in a plain version of those. But the Spanish potato chips are amazing. There's a couple of brands that come out. They're quite expensive, and you can buy them at fancy food shops and at wine shops, and they're really good, really delicious. Mm. Sonia, your prawn dumplings went well. I'm glad. I think that would be good. Yes, Shell, say no to fried egg chips every time. Peter and Karen, it was okay with our 2 different types of pork and prawn dumplings. The soy sauce can be a bit overpowering. Absolutely. I'd be almost tempted to, instead of using soy sauce, I'd be tempted to use a little bit of a rice wine vinegar and just a tiny bit of chili sauce mixed in without too much. Haven't been able to get the porcini chips recently, Karen. I would also sulk about that if I'd been trying to get them. Are you home at the moment? Are they not at the local IGA? That's an absolute travesty. I'll have to demand them when I'm back in there shopping. I think I'm going to have to pour myself a little bit more wine. I'm going to pour it straight from the bottle this time and see if it makes any difference compared to my decanting. The potato chips from Hawke's Farm are the best. Yes, Nigel. Now, this is actually, you're not supposed to tell anyone about them because they're already too well known. There's a farm down here on the Mornington Peninsula called Hawke's Farm, and they specialise they grow lots of things, but their potatoes are amazing. And we have a connection with them via one of Jeremy's children. Tenuous, I know, but still, the potatoes, when you buy them, they're so fresh and they are so delicious. I don't know any of you who have grown your own potatoes and dug them up and then eaten them that night. They taste like that, and when you haven't had potatoes like that, then it's really hard to. Once you have fresh potatoes like that, it's really hard to go back. They are next level. Now, the guys at Hawke's Farm also, I think just on the weekends, make their own hand-cut, fried on the spot potato chips, and they've become so famous that people come and queue for miles to get them. And a friend of mine on Saturdays, thank you, Jeremy, and a friend of mine came down and queued and missed out. They'd sold out by the time they got before they got to the front of the queue, which is a very sad story. But I've not had the Hawke's Farm chips, but I have had their potatoes, and they are worth traveling a long way to get. It makes me realise that maybe I don't have any Irish blood in me, but I do love a good potato. All right. Bert's British hand-cooked sea salt from Foodworks. They're very good, Sonia, absolutely. Really good. All right. Well, team, it might be nearly time to finish up. I've just got to say, I'm very impressed. The dogs have been amazing. Fido's over there and Polly's behind me. They've been so good. I've got to go and find some cats and feed them. I've got some cockatoos just arriving for their evening snacks. Good strawberries, Nigel, at Hawke's Farm. Oh, Cotty, 5 minutes from you. Well, that's not sad. That's awesome. Maybe not so good for the waistline, but, got to have some perks about, living down here on the Mornington Peninsula. The farms are good. So the sun's come out. The cockatoos have arrived. The peacock is wandering around out on the balcony. It's all very idyllic. I've got chooks to feed. Yeah, cats to wrangle. So I should probably finish up here. Oh, and we just got hacked by some bot again, which I'm going to ignore for the moment. So next week is our last tasting together before we have our little Christmas break, which is very sad, but also exciting because we've got a beautiful wine. I can't remember what it is though. It's an older Pinot Noir, but I can't remember. Was it a 15 Robinson? Maybe Nigel will be able to tell me. But it's the last one in your box. And I will put my brain to some very inventive food and wine matches for the Robinson Pinot for our Christmas party. Feel free to wear a party hat if you want to. Robinson 18, is it? Excellent. Jeremy, you can't find your love in my city. I've just deleted them all. So hopefully they'll go away. Thank you. 2018 Robinson Pinot. Excellent. So it's not an old wine. It's a wine that is drinking really beautifully right now. You might have noticed the Magnum offer that we put out, which was also the 2018 wine. So, if you haven't bought any Magnums and you taste the 2018 next week and you love it and you want to get some more, we've got a little bit of the 750 mils. We also have some Magnums from 2018 Robinson Pinot, as well as all the other single vineyard wines. So if you're interstate, cut-off date for Aussie Post orders is next Monday. After that, we're going to hold orders and send them when it's not too hot in January. Anyone who is local enough to come and pick up or for us to deliver in our cars, we'll still do deliveries, obviously, next week. And cellar door is open next week and the following week until Friday. So I think that's right. I'll check all those dates and remind you again next week. But until then, thank you so much, Jackie. Lovely to see you. Lovely Chardonnay going well with our prawn rolls. How fantastic. Kate, you're right. The Magnum is awesome. You did grab one recently, and I was so glad that you could come to the tasting. There are some Magnums left, so don't tarry, because they're good for the Christmas table as well. That's enough spruiking from me. I'm not very good at it, so I'll stop. I'll say happy Thursday night and cheers to you all. I love this wine and I love you. See you later, guys. Bye.